Well, I will talk about the underestimation of the risk in Japan. But before that, I also need to mention that he overestimated my profile. So please make it much lower. Yes, I am living in Japan for last now almost 18 and a half years. As you know that it's a very cold society. It's a very closed society, and there are lots of things which are not written anywhere, which people don't express that much, which you have to just feel by being there in the environment, and that's a very traditional Japanese. And I don't think that I understand each and every aspect of the Japanese social life. Yes, my wife is Japanese. I have a very strangely, I have a Japanese nationality, but still having a passport or having a wife and understanding the actual reality of the society is really different thing. So what I try to mention here a little bit over past 1 month, what are the issues coming up, but I will actually make it in a reverse order, because what we can help, unless we understand the situation, it's very difficult to discuss what we can help or how. So let me first allow to explain that what are the major issues and problems. And from outside, possibly due to lack of knowledge or lack of possibly written documents in English, we somehow have a very positive view about Japan, especially on this bill. Yes, I'm not saying, and please don't misunderstand me, that this disaster showed all the negative aspects of Japan. There are lots of positive things, but you also have to be realistic and try to see a little bit on a critical aspect, that what things did not work. And I will show you some of the facts and figures. Initially, I was planning not to show any in any PowerPoint presentation, but some of the photographs and some of the graphs our students actually prepared and my colleagues prepared. I think that tells a very vivid story. So I will show some of the presentations here. But before that, let me tell you the personal story, that when the event happened, I was in Bangladesh with one of my Bangladeshi students, and we were doing some field survey. And it was in Japan time, the earthquake was 1446. And I think my wife called me half an hour. She told me that there is a major earthquake, and we heard that there is a tsunami happened, but we still have not enough information. The phone lines are not working. So normal phone was not working, but she could call me through Skype. And then actually I asked my student to stop the car and let's see at this internet, mobile internet. We saw open the internet, and saw some images coming up that there are some fires happened. NHK had already taken some videos that time that the tsunami was approaching. That was some of those pictures coming up, and we still could not understand. I thought that okay, let's go back to the hotel and let's see that what's going on. And then I started looking at BBC, and then let us switch over to NHK, and then things came up. When I was trying to call back my home, the phone lines of course didn't work, but somehow I could send a text message to the mobile, but and that worked very well. And she could, my wife could also send back me the SMS, but the phone line means you cannot call. And somehow I think later I heard from some of my colleagues also that when you call, another interesting thing actually, I don't have any explanation for that, that lots of domestic calls could not reach, but lots of international calls could reach. I don't know what's the mechanism behind that, but this is just an observation. So yes, after that I went back and cutting short my visit to Bangladesh, and then started monitoring different news, especially what we were seeing outside in BBC or NHK World. When you see the Japanese TV news, it's totally different perspective. So Yes, after that also I appeared in the NHK wall, but and they all admit, the NHK people also admit that what due to different reasons, some direct, some indirect reasons, that what news coming up outside and what the news which are circulated inside with the local media, I won't say it's totally different, but there is a phase difference as well. Possibly what we are getting outside is maybe a few days later or some summary type of thing. Okay. Now after that, we recently, almost 8 or 9 days back, we took a field survey. What I will be talking today are essentially on the left hand side, you see this one small report called Mega Disaster in a Resilient Society. The hard copies are there, so you can browse through that. And this is one. This was done by our students, and we have all the different students from different countries, and also our Japanese students. They actually tried to compile this one. This is mostly the facts and figures in first 2 weeks. And the right hand side, this is after the damage assessment, and it shows some of the field observations. When we went to the field, we talked to the local government, means the provincial government, city government, then some of the NGO coordination center, then the evacuation center, we talked to some of the local affected people, and some of the NGOs actually who are already working in that particular area. So this will give you, again, I should emphasize that this possibly doesn't give the whole picture, and what I am seeing or what I am telling, definitely there are some biasness. Maybe I am seeing in a very narrow perspective. There are lots of other different issues which will come out in future. So, but at least when we go to the field, there are some vivid field realities which comes when you talk to the local people, which possibly not documented or not in the TV or not in the picture. So I try to mix the two things together and try to tell you that what happened or how maybe all of you know the locations more or less, but these few words will come out several times. This is Tokyo, the airport, and these are the 4 most affected prefectures: Iwate, Miyagi, Fukushima, Ibaraki. And this Chiba is another place where there is not that much of tsunami damage, but a little bit of earthquake damage. And Fukushima now is very famous, all of you, the nuclear power plant, and those are the location of Fukushima 1 and 2. So you will be hearing about these 4 names time and again. Now about the event, before we go about all the damages, what happened and all these things, we need to understand the severity of this particular event. It's a 9 magnitude and 30 kilometers off the Pacific coast, and the depth was 24 kilometers. Okay, possibly that does not really tell the severity. Now I would like to mention about the intensity. I will not go into the details of this, but the Japanese scale intensity 7 is equivalent to the highest intensity in the eye. Those who are familiar with the intensity scale, it has a division from 1 to 12 to the maximum. Intensity is for the people who don't have this background. Intensity is that when the earth shakes, how you feel like, and magnitude is the absolute number. So what I am trying to say here, that in some of the locations, the highest intensity or the highest shaking, earthquake shaking happened. Now, this area had many different earthquakes earlier. These are the 3 major ones. 1896, there was a major earthquake and tsunami, followed by 1933, and then 1960. In 1960 was the Chilean earthquake, and the tsunami wave arrived after 18 hours or so, and that killed around 1,000 people. And that time we did not have the Pacific tsunami warning system, and this was the reason after 1960s the Pacific tsunami warning system was set up. So what I'm trying to say here is that This area, earthquake and tsunami are not new, both in terms of severity, both in terms of damage. It happened earlier also. Now, what is the difference between the earlier earthquakes and this current earthquake? Again, I won't go into the technical details of this, but just for your understanding, as all of you know that an earthquake happens when a segment of fault breaks. So there were 3 fault segments which actually broke simultaneously for this one. And this is an earthquake research institute of University of Tokyo simulation. The whole fault segment, the width was around 200 kilometers, and the length, the north-south length, is around 500 kilometers. I'm telling it just a round figure, 200 and 500, just to give you an idea of what was the segment of the earth which actually moved. For that reason, this type of particular earthquake happened last time in the first Japanese history in the same area, which was recorded in 869 AD. So almost 1200 years back. And that's the Kyogan earthquake and tsunami. So argument is that yes, this is a very rare event, not once in 30 years or once in 50 years or once in 100 years event. People argue, the seismologists argue, that it is once in 1,000 years. And this is in fact what happened 1200 years back. So just keep that in mind. Okay, this is again a simulation that how this is also with the University of Tokyo, that how the shaking actually spreaded. Maybe difficult to see, but the essence why I am showing this one, that the shaking was felt almost all through the Japanese islands, starting from Hokkaido in the north to Kyushu in the south. And lots of people, the reason I mentioned about my personal experience that my wife called me, when she works in Tokyo and her office is a little bit higher in an upright building. And as you know, maybe some of you know that when there is a very long distance earthquake, when the earthquake happens from a long distance, then the tall building shakes heavily. So the people who are a little bit in the higher floors, they feel badly. So in her office also, the book shelves and the books actually came out of the shelves, and there was some major shaking. So yes, in Tokyo, also even in Osaka, some places the high-rise building, they felt shaking. Now another major issue regarding the earthquake is the aftershock. On 11th March itself, there were 3 aftershocks of magnitude 7 plus on that day particular. So again, why I am showing all these details is try to give you an idea about the severity of this particular hazard. And this is not a normal hazard. I mean, we know that yes, Japan is a very earthquake-prone country, and Japan earthquakes are every time. But severity, this is not the regular one which we experience. There were 3 7.0 and first 1 week there were 3 more than 7 magnitude earthquake and 49 more than 6 magnitude earthquake. These type of aftershocks has major implication in the search and rescue and following all of my post-disaster control. You all understand it very well. And what I was just checking the Gujarat event, that the IMD was 6.9 or something initially, but the USDA magnitude was 7.7. And then the maximum aftershock, what I told actually yesterday, the day before, the maximum aftershock was 6.3 or something, right? It's in the range of 6 magnitude, and that was only 2. And then rest are around 3, 4, and 5. Of course, aftershocks are very common. And when the earth movement starts, then to make it stable, or to not make it stable, or to bring the normal or normal condition, I think it will take lots of time. So what possibly some people, the seismologists in Japan are saying, possibly these aftershock may continue 1 year, sometimes 1.5 years, because for Kobe, it continued more than 8 months. So, and all this has lots of other social implications. The people become, if there are some people, and it also helps, it also makes problem in the rescue operation. Like there were lots of people who were doing the rescue in the coastal area, and then this major again aftershock. They have to again evacuate all the people inside the highway, and it all disrupts. The train, even in Tokyo, trains automatically stop. And when the train stops, to make it once again operational, you need the lead time of around 30 to 40 minutes. And it's now happening almost every day. I was telling Manu that my son, who is 5-year-old, we just talked this morning, he told, just 5 minutes before, Papa, there was an earthquake of magnitude 5.9. The depth was 6 kilometers and the intensity was this. Means even a 5-year-old kid is now so much accustomed with this type of aftershock, but we are safe. So, so this aftershock was a major event. Again, what I am trying to say here is the magnitude of the event was really, really large. At 1 month after the event, on 11/10/11/12, there were 7 magnitude earthquake again, 3 7 magnitude aftershock. And again, some people were telling that the aftershock locations are gradually moving southward. I told that it's a 500 long fault zone, so it's gradually moving southward. But again, possibly too early to make any conclusion. But these are the observations. I was planning to show a couple of videos, but I don't think that the video will work that much. And many of you may be seen lots of videos, but later if it becomes dark, then maybe I will show this one. Let's go to the damages. This was before the tsunami, and you can imagine possibly by seeing the height of the tree, it's maybe around 8 to 10 meters. Now, the same tree during the tsunami. Now, there are different ways of defining the tsunami height. When it hits, that's one height. When it enters into the narrow gorge, and then, of course, the height increases. So we always see in the media that, okay, the height was 30 meters, height was 20 meters, or height was 15 meters, without possibly understanding that where the height was measured. But here, this is the coastal belt. When the tsunami was hitting, it's already almost 10 meters. So again, it shows the severity of the event. The same thing, on an average, the trees are around maybe 8 to 10 meters tall. So you can see that when tsunami is coming, it's already quite high. Then this very black mud, you have definitely seen this as a photograph. Many of you have also the video in the YouTube and so many places. So there was this sea dike. So this is a major sea dike actually, where it is. This is the first one, and this should be another one, the second level of sea dike. I will come to the infrastructure issue of the sea dike issue a little bit later, but it overflowed. Now, coming to the tsunami height, initially we had absolutely no idea that what was the tsunami height. Due to the severity of the event, means usually the Japanese academic society are very, very active after any disaster, and they always send the survey team, whether the disaster is in Japan or outside. But due to the severity of the event, all the academic society, all disciplines, they have decided not to send any survey team because it will create additional pressure. But more than that, there are major gasoline problem in this particular area. I will later show some of the gasoline, this storage, the tanks which were actually blasted or carrying fire. So due to gasoline problem, and also there were food problems in some of the areas, so the academic society stopped Yes, Sarbatin. This is, sorry, it's in Japanese, but this shows the very recent, this is the 9th of April, and it was done, survey was done by the Japan Geographical Society, and this height is the inundation height, not the tsunami height which was struck. And many of you who are familiar with the Japanese landscape, in Japan most of the area are mountain, and it has a very narrow coastal area, and there is a huge population concentration in the coastal area. So, and the rivers are very short and very sort of steep rivers. So usually the tsunami actually when it enters through the river, and then it becomes a gorge. So, and when it becomes very narrow, then the tsunami height becomes very high. So this was done by measuring those tsunami inundation height, and you can see the maximum one even went up to 25 meters or so. Especially in the, this is left, right hand side is the north of Japan, and the left hand side is the south. So the northern part, the height was extremely high. Another way of seeing this tsunami height is these are the sensors which the Japan Meteorological Agency had along the coastal area. So they call the float height, which is like when the tsunami comes, the sensor also comes higher. And then when it actually hits the land area, so it records that particular height. So these are some of those, these are actually means when the tsunami actually struck the land area. So here also you can see around maybe 15 to 17 meters. So in some cases, possibly the lowest one, means these are not all the data, but the one which are recorded. You can see a major variation between 4 meters to almost 17 meters. And this was the initial JMA's Japan Meteorological Agency estimation, that their estimation was something between 1 meter to 45 meters. So what I'm trying to say here is JMA made the estimation, and it's a standard. For any earthquake, they make the calculations, and they made the announcement that okay, this time the tsunami will come, this is the expected height. But all this, what actually was observed, was totally beyond what was predicted immediately after the event. Now let me show about some of the damage photographs. Again, you have seen this many times possibly. Okay. This is a panoramic view of a city. You can see that almost, this is just a panorama, and you can see that almost nothing is left behind. And this is a very famous photograph that in the 4th floor, people were waiting for the rescue, and they took shelter, and you can see that a huge amount of debris which covered all the lower 3 stories. I don't need to explain possibly this one, that again it tells the huge severity of the event. I saw this personally also. There is a marking which tells about you what is the height. And the total height of this ship from bottom to top is 18 meters. So you can imagine that 18 meters means almost 6-story building. So this is 4. So add another 2. Yeah. So that big ship, it was transported inland. So again, it shows the event was not the regular event. Now this was, I will come to this issue maybe later once again, that I will come about the earthquake damage a little bit later. But in many cases actually in the coastal area, we have seen the houses were almost intact. It's sliced from the basement, and the whole house was, in the water, the whole house was floating. The water remains like that, possibly the house will be floating like that. So when the house got damaged, when it hits with another house or when it hits with the car or when the water recedes. That's the main damage that the houses have. In most of the cases you will see quite intact type of housing, but of course you cannot use that. Railway line in the lower part and damage in the port area. Same railway line damage. So there was fire in different places, and many of you possibly see the video that there was a house which caught fire and which was actually moving in the water with the debris and all these things. So there were 2 or 3 different reasons for the fire. One was that the domestic fire which started due to the use of gas, but those are very, very minor. Most of the fire I think which happened was 2 parts. One is in the refinery. This refinery caught fire, and then the next one is there was a leakage in this particular city. There was a leakage of the oil tank. There was an oil tank, and it got leakage, and then it got catch fire. And when we visited there almost 3 weeks after the event, still if you just walk around the city, still smell that oil and the sort of burnt smell is still there. Because half of the city was burnt. These are very, very sort of zonal fire. It's very, very one-point fire. But in most of the cases, in that particular city actually, what happened was the whole city was burnt, and it was a major disaster. And of course the huge amount of sediment, debris and all those things which remains on the ground when you go back. Now when the water goes back. And again we have seen the before after images. It was very well documented. There were several satellite images published by many different organizations, from UN, from AIT, from JAXA. So you can see that the whole city were in some cases damaged. And this was the famous nuclear issue. I won't cover the nuclear issue that strongly because I'm not an expert on that, and I don't want to give a false impression. But I will tell it at the end of this discussion that what was the feeling of the normal citizens in Japan about the nuclear issue. Now, this is the maybe difficult to see, but this is the city which actually this whole area what you see on the right hand side from the railway line to here, this whole area was under fire. Now, what are the different emerging issues which now age distribution? I need to explain you that you will see two types of wording. In Japan, we have the death. Death means the bodies which are recovered. So this number 12,915 as of 10th of April are the bodies which are recovered after this devastation. But bodies recovering is one thing, but body identification is a different thing. So you will see out of 12,000, there were 7,935 bodies which were identified by the family. And that 7,935, you see on the right hand side the age distribution, that almost 28% is between 40 to 64 years, and almost 65%, more than 65 is almost 55 years. But please don't make a conclusion that most of the death was with the aged people, because we have this huge number of missing, 14,921. Missing means the bodies which have not been recovered. People register to the police station that okay, I cannot find my son or daughter or mother or father, then this is counted. So those are the missing number, and much of that is still under this nuclear zone, the 30-kilometer zone where the immediate rescue operation was not there. But also another significant part of the bodies are still under the sea, which is actually transported back. to the sea. So this is the first time in Japan after the World War II that Japan had a mass burial because of the non-identified bodies. And mass burial in the Japanese society is an extremely sort of culture shock to cope with, especially the people who are living. It usually the custom is that they burn the body and then they collect the asthi, the bones, and then make it cemented, this one. And this family graveyard is a very important part of Japanese tradition. And every year there are certain dates when you visit the family graveyard and pay respect to people who passed away. So this was a major sort of culture shock for the people that the mass burial was conducted in Japan. Now, this graph, this was done by one of my colleagues. She was noting down every day in the newspaper that how this number actually increased or decreased. Why I am showing this one is that, okay, this was from 12th of March to 11th of April. So almost 1 month later, not almost 1 month later. You will see that after 13th March, there has been a huge jump in the number of deaths as well as the missing persons. So usually the Japanese system is very organized when it comes to the numbers. And means the Japanese family register and all are very, it has a long tradition for almost 150 years or so. So the numbers are very sensitive thing for Japan. For any accident or disasters, in many cases, like when we were talking about the Indian Ocean tsunami, sometimes in Indonesia, any rain goes to 150,000 to 180,000 or something. But in Japan, it will never go. If it goes 12,541 is exactly 12,541 because they are very precise about the numbers. But what happened in the first 2-3 days, there was absolutely no idea that how many people died, who were missing, and many of the government officials in many of the small local cities and towns, they were even missing. And so it was very difficult for in the first initial few days to understand, initial few days in 2-3 days, to understand that what has happened. And then you will see that there was a huge gap between the missing and the dead people, and then gradually they try to, when you, as I mentioned, missing means, well, I don't know, and the dead people means possibly some of them we identify, and then gradually when it merges, that means that you identify, not identify, you at least collect the dead bodies. So again it shows one of the severity of the event, that first few days initially there was absolutely no idea what happened, and then it took quite a bit of long time to actually do this search and rescue operation. The evacuees don't see those first 3 days data. Possibly there was not zero. Actually there was no data. But then there was a nuclear explosion was there in the, not nuclear explosion, but in the reactor explosion was there. And suddenly you see that the people evacuated very strongly, and some were sort of forced evacuation, those were mandatory evacuation, and some were sort of actually voluntarily they went because but gradually it is coming down, but still we have around 150,000. Yeah, around 150,000 evacuees as of 11th of April. So all this data and numbers shows the severity of the event, both in terms of the event, which is once in 1,000 years, the seismologists claim that. The tsunami height is also means how much, whether we believe the initial height, the maximum height, so this whole gap. So So there was a major event and also the number of the casualties. Now let's see about some of the other issues, which are the underestimating the early warning system. These are the facts again. 1446 was the earthquake. 1449, the Japan Meteorological Agency issued the tsunami warning. 1450, it was in the web, and it automatically comes to the TV scribe and also in the radio. So it took only 4 minutes from the information provider side or the warning provider side to the people. And then this is a survey by one major newspaper, by Asahi newspaper, and they surveyed, this is mainly by the telephone interview, they interviewed 7,000 from 5 different prefectures, those affected prefectures. And out of that, only, there are 2 observations out of this survey, that on an average it took 23 minutes for them to actually realize or understand or get the information. So it's not that the warning system took 23 minutes to reach, but for the people, the warning system or the warning information was already there at the initial, these 4 minutes. But for the people, providing information one thing, but for the people to get that information and react, that took almost 23 minutes. Only 8% people actually took shelter on an average of these 7,900 people. That 8% people took shelter to the designated evacuation shelter. Again, that's definitely not a desirable number as far all the preparation is done. And this whole 53%, they told that they thought that where they are, they were safe. Of course, 7,900 people were still living, so they were safe possibly, maybe that's a right judgment, but what I'm trying to mention here is that warning is one thing, but people always take their own decisions in spite of all the drills and education and awareness. So how we break that boundary between providing the information and for the people to react to that information and take that action. They always make their own judgment, and which is also this was quite shocking to me, because usually we think that in Japan it's on the system and usually people follow the system. But still, in this type of case, people took their own decision. I will come to the reason for that, is that this area, there have been so many disasters, that they have done so much of evacuation drill. Somehow people had this fake self-confidence or feel safe mentality. That, oh, I need to escape. What happened last year in 2010, 27th of February, many of you know that there was an earthquake in Chile. The next day, almost 16 or 17 hours after, tsunami came to Japan, and there was a tsunami warning issued. The height was not that much, the maximum was 130 centimeters. 130 centimeters like this. But people, and 9 to 12% only evacuated during that time. People went to coastal area to see that weather is okay, and I mean, they were too self-confident. So what I'm trying to point out again, lack of awareness is also bad, but too much of awareness or getting too accustomed to the system and getting too accustomed to the information, and people think that, no, it's okay, I know, I will take my decision. That's also possible. Somehow we need to balance. I have no answer that how to break that boundary, but let's discuss that issue at a later stage. Infrastructure. This particular photograph was from a small town called Tharo, and which was hit by 1896, and this in the 1896 there was a major casualty. Only maybe 3 or 4% of the total population actually survived, and the rest actually wiped away. Then in 1933 again, same area was a tsunami, and then the local mayor, he decided to make a dike, and of course this dike was not made in one time. There was different sort of state-of-art infrastructure mitigation measures which Japan is proud of. The total dike height is 10 meter, length is 3.5 kilometer, And there has been lots of, usually when we talk about Japan and tsunami, we tell usually two things. One is the infrastructure, which is this point. Another one is the Inamura no Hi. Many of you might be knowing that in some area in the actual western part of Japan, there was an earthquake and tsunami, and then the village leader who actually put fire on his own asset, the with the straws and rice, and then the people actually evacuated from the lowland to put off the, not evacuated, they actually came to help him for the, to extinguish the fire, and then people got, they were saved. So this is a symbolic sort of self-sacrifice and the leadership issue, more on the softer aspect, and this is more on the hard aspect. Okay, this, and you can see that the same dike, and these were the images. I won't say that the dike did not work at all. Yes, definitely, I have a couple of videos which shows that yes, coastal dike really helps. But sometimes the people who are living there, they have some false safety perception that, okay, possibly we are safe. And the village head was also, village head was, he had no damage, he survived, and he was telling the same thing that he was thought that it will be like this, I thought that this dike we are protected. So again, one is that underestimating, and another one is the self-protection. But there are positive sides. This particular small city, Kamaishi, they had done education program, purely disaster education in the schools, to the education department, in the school education, in the city education department. 1,200 people died, out of that only 5 were school children. There were around 2,900 school children in that particular city, out of that only 5 people died. And that is a great example. Like if you see these two buildings, this was the elementary school, and this is the junior high school. Junior high school in Japan is between 12 to 15 years age, and the elementary is between 6 to 12. So when the junior high school students, when they evacuated, they actually took with them the elementary school children together, and they evacuated. And that's why there were a major life saving. Because for the elementary school, maybe it's difficult for them to take judgment unless the teacher says something, okay, go like this. But the junior high school students, they took the leadership and they showed us the example. Another good practice, evacuation shelter. This particular building, you can see that there are signs, and even it's written in English, the tsunami evacuation area. And you need to go, this is the 4th floor, so you need to go 4th floor and above. And I personally visited this building, and I saw that the tsunami height, maybe the mark of the water may be between the 2nd floor to 3rd floor, the water actually went. So we talked to some of the residents, and people said that 3rd of March, just 8 days before the tsunami, 3rd of March was the day for 1933 earthquake and tsunami. So just 8 days before, they had the evacuation rate, and they took, some people took shelter to this particular building, and some people took shelter to a nearby, they call the evacuation road. I mean, this is just a normal mountain road, but what they did is that they had the stairs so that you can just go up and you can take shelter there. So again, yes, evacuation drill or the sort of awareness raising, it works. Again, it's very contrasting that sometimes too much of misperception or self-reliance or self-judgment is also not good, but sometimes yes, it works, and you will see this is the evacuation road, and I actually wanted to show you a video from, that video was taken from this particular road. This is again another very interesting but very difficult to explain phenomena we call tsunami tendenko. This is the Japanese term which means like we are in different places, but it has a very sort of philosophical meaning that earlier in 1896 when the tsunami happened, then many people they actually were trying to look for their neighbors or their family members, and that took lots of time for them to evacuate. But that actually developed, they actually developed some understanding, which actually has a very deep meaning of mutual trust and understanding, in the sense that, okay, now first thing is that I should evacuate, I should take a shelter to some places. And I am confident that my father or my son or my other relatives, they will also take the same action. So I don't need to look for them. This is a very, very interesting and very philosophical meaning, and that actually helps a lot, and that originated from this particular area. Underestimating tsunami height. Earlier I mentioned about the tsunami height issue by JMA, but again, what you are seeing is a document from the Cabinet Office. It's in the Cabinet Office means the Prime Minister's Office website, which is the main body for the overarching body for the disaster management. What you are seeing in the red one is the tsunami height for Jogan earthquake, which was 800. And you see the height was, in some cases, 20 meters. This is 20, this is 20 meters. So 20 meters. So what we are seeing in this particular disaster is again not new. Yes, it is rare, but that height of 15 meter or 20 meter, or in some cases the inundation height of 30 meters, that's not new. If this type of, and I mentioned earlier that 869 was the time when 869 was that particular disaster when this whole fault line, this segment actually broke. So this was there in the Cabinet Office website, but in many cases, this is a hazard map of the city, and this hazard map, and I actually talked to some of the consulting firm who prepared this hazard map. There are two hazard maps which are prepared, one for 4 meters, one for 8 meters. And this is for the 4 meters, which was distributed to the common people. And the 8 meter never went to the people. Again, please don't misunderstand me that I'm not trying to criticize their process. But this is a Japanese culture that if the government puts an hazard map and shows the hazard to the people, then it becomes the government's responsibility that you have to take some mitigation measures. And many of these particular smaller cities, they don't have resources. It's very similar to any other developing country, because most of the people, the aged population is there, and they mostly are on the pension, or they are mostly the farmers or the small fishermen. So very few local government has that resource to make this type of mega tariff. So you cannot give the 8 meter map. So what I was thinking, possibly we need something like very similar to the Indian with information, right for information act, right to information act, like something like that. Possibly we will see this type of change, that it's not the liability issue of the local government, but it's the people's right to know the risk, different types of risk. Whether the local government has the resources or not, that should not be the barrier to give the information to the people. They should be more open to give the information. Okay, this can be the worst scenario, but with our resources we can do maximum this, and rest you should be taking your action, or you should be doing something else. So possibly this type of change, and this will be a major change actually in Japan if it happens. So this type of change, maybe it's too early to say anything, but I see at least some of this type of major sort of policy changes or major administrative changes will happen. In many cases, the local government itself was damaged, and that actually helped had a major problem. This is the disaster center of one of the cities. You can see the warning tower on the top, and this story was actually circulated in many places. It's in Japanese movie. There was a young girl of 24 or 25 years old who was giving the warning from the third floor of that particular building, and then she actually washed away, and which was actually documented by, in its case, helicopter footage. many people, around 50 people got a shelter, and they thought that maybe the disaster management center will be a good place to take shelter, and they took a shelter on the top, and it was there. Again, it's not the fault of possibly the disaster management state, because they might have not thought of this type of mega disasters, but when I saw this particular area, this was a very, very flat land, and very different from the narrow gorges or the one which I showed earlier, the evacuation road where you can just climb up. And here, the nearest mountain area or nearest hilly area, you have to go at least 5 kilometers to 6 kilometers. And with the speed of the tsunami, it's just impossible for the people to reach to that area. So possibly, again, we need to possibly build the same concept as what Bangladesh or the Andhra Pradesh or Odisha, the cyclone shelters, that possibly in one village there should be one strong shelter in the coastal area, not everywhere, but at least where there is this type of huge flat land and people could take shelters there. Livelihood, I won't go into the details of that, but I want to highlight that World Bank and Japanese government also agreed that the total loss would be 300 billion or something, and that's the infrastructure, everything. But this particular area has lots of small fishermen farms, and how much percentage of that particular loss is included into the 300 billion, possibly very, very insignificant. Even possibly doesn't come to 1%, but it's very big loss for the individuals. And if the fishermen are more than 60, 65 years old, very difficult for them to get back to their work and get another loan to buy another new boat and to make this livelihood. So which type of livelihood or which type of changes? We talked to some of the fishermen's association, and they told that even some of the fishermen are thinking that possibly fishermen in Japan, they are very self-independent, and it's a sort of rival. Like, you are my rival because we are going to the same area for the fishing, catch and all these things. So there are not, yes, there are the cooperative, but it's very, very sort of independent. But they are thinking that possibly we will have a small group, and then you cannot buy the boat by individuals, so maybe 3 or 4 or 5 or 10 people come together and make a smaller cooperative and buy a boat or so. Environmental issue, again, it's a major, major problem. Debris, everywhere where you go, huge amount of debris. And several of my students actually did their analysis after the Indian Ocean tsunami, especially the cost-benefit analysis, when you segregate the debris in the original place and then actually you bring to the dump site, and that's one cost, and then you bring everything together to the dump site and then you segregate. It's a totally 4 or 5 times cost differences. And we also had the data from the Japan as well. So in this particular area, there is almost no vacant land for the debris segregation on site. So you have to bring actually to somewhere else, or for Kobe earthquake, what happened is that lots of the debris were actually put under the sea and made this reclaimed land. But now the current condition in the sea bottom is that there are still lots of already existing debris, sea, even dead bodies. So it's very difficult possibly to bring the debris directly to the sea. So there needs to be a temporary location, and that will cost again a long time, and unless you clear the debris, you can't make any construction, and that's the major problem. And not only just the debris, it will have problem with the land, the water, ecosystem, especially on the coastal ecosystem. Another issue, coastal belt. What you see on the left hand side is, in this particular city, there were 70,000 pine trees. It's a very good coastal belt, and it's a very famous coastal belt, 70,000. And very strangely, symbolically, only one is left, and it becomes a big news actually in Nepal. So what I'm trying to again possibly understand, that yes, coastal belt helps. On the right hand side you can see that the bent coastal area which is not uprooted. But possibly coastal belt again alone cannot withstand this type of mega event. It definitely reduce the height, reduce strength. We have seen the effect of mangroves in many places in the Indian Ocean area, Indian Ocean tsunami. Yes, it helps. But possibly, again, for this type of mega disaster, there is a big question mark. Coastal belt plus some other prefectures they did, that they decided that 4 to 5 prefectures, they will support only one prefecture in the East Japan. And so that there is no overlap. And when you talk about the support, many of the prefectures or local government, they lost their people. So the human resources, the technical resources, material, monetary. So that was a very, very good example that how the prefectures can help each other in a more coordinated way. The NGO coordination has just started. There have been 2 NGO centers which have been set up in 2 affected prefectures. They work very closely with the local government. Actually, the NGO coordination centers are located within the local government, the prefectural government, and that actually helped a lot for the information sharing. And the volunteer coordination. Volunteer coordination has a totally different system actually. You don't go into the details of that. After the Kobe earthquake, there is a centralized system that you can register yourself with all your expertise, your availability time and all these things, and there is a central database. So then based on the local needs, they just in the website they upload that okay, we need maybe 500 people who has this healthcare, very basic healthcare facility. I mean, who knows the healthcare issue, very basic thing. So this type of volunteer coordination helps. Temporary shelter will be a major problem again. 65,000 temporary shelter has been officially requested by the prefecture government. Land problem is a major issue, and as you know, as you can see, that these are all the dark one are all the mountains, and this narrower are the town area, and this is the sea. So you can see that it's a very, very narrow area, and unless it's in the debris, it's very difficult to put the temporary shelter, and even if you put the temporary shelter, it will be maybe 20 kilometers or 30 kilometers from the actual place, and that may create a major issue in future. What we found very interesting, and that's why possibly we can really contribute quite a bit, is this customized information sharing. In many cases, we have found that the disaster communication system broke out and it did not work, or the power failure, or the TV did not work, but what was radio. And this community FM, which worked in many cases extremely well. And what we are thinking now, possibly in future, we mean in seeds, what we are thinking is possibly we try to develop some very customized community FM system, and the most important part is the customized information which is not there in the TV or which is not there in the newspaper. They give a very generic information of the whole prefecture. But here, to the small town, they need that what are the major problems, when which type of scheme are coming, or which part has debris has been cleaned, or what are the other needs. So what we are trying to develop is a system that the volunteers, they will go to the local community, try to local evacuation center, try to get their needs, and then we have an interface with the local government, get that information, and then make it sort of narrow casting to those particular areas. So, and we found some very good people there who are willing to work on this. I'm almost on the end. The earthquake damage. You see, with the 9 magnitudes and intensity, the highest level of intensity, there was virtually no visible earthquake damage. You see the buildings here which were totally washed away by the tsunami. Little bit in the up where there was no tsunami arrived, the buildings are intact. You can see that there was, this is a small river through which the tsunami arrived, but all other areas, the buildings stand. The same thing from here. There were some tiles on the top which actually just so this was one of the major significant achievements, and we should really be proud of that, the earthquake risk mitigation. Especially many of my colleagues in Kyoto University, which is very famous for earthquake mitigation, they are very proud. The earthquake in works well. yes, they are right that if we had additional earthquake damages, so then the situation would have been much worse. And whenever we see that we go from the little bit, all the roads are all up and down. So normal in the hillside, you go to the coastal area, you see the total disaster. But point is that can we be satisfied by saying that okay, earthquake, this reduction worked well? And you see how the buildings were actually cut off. These are the relics of the basement. You see in most of the cases, basement is there. I think just someone sliced the building. And you see, as I mentioned earlier, that in many cases, the building as a structural unit, it stays there. And only the damages happen when it may be hit with someone. So how we can make multi-hazard? Again, it's very easy to say multi-hazard, but how many hazards you can cover? No answer to that one, but it's a major issue. The nuclear thing, I will just very briefly touch upon on 2 points that, again, not from the technical perspective, but as a citizen perspective, that there are 2 issues which came out very strongly. That when the government was doing the press release, there were 4 different places where the press conferences are done. Prime Minister does one, Chief Cabinet Secretary does one, the TEPCO, which is the Tokyo Electric Power Corporation, who owns this nuclear reactor. TEPCO in Tokyo, they does one, and TEPCO near Fukushima, they have outside that 30-kilometer boundary, they have a sort of emergency management office set up, and they have one. So these 4 places, okay, information goes possibly one way, but then when you accept the questions, then people start thinking or reacting in different ways. And that makes huge confusion. That's one point. So possibly one of the major lessons, and lots of experts, they were also telling that there should be only one person or only one place where the press conference will be done, and that coordinated, this would be well coordinated. Second one is for this type of invisible disaster, the trust in the information is extremely low. Once you lose because we are not seeing it, we don't understand that how much of the numbers we will say that okay, these are the numbers and this thing. So it's very difficult to understand. We are not measuring this one. So people trust to the information. Once it is broken, it's very difficult. Then people start panicking. And what happened is that in Tokyo there was a panic. People started buying all the food and all these things. So my wife had to actually come to Kyoto for almost 10 days because there was no food, almost no food available in the supermarket. And the government banned vegetables and food supply from this 30 kilometers. And there were lots of food products in this particular area. So yes, at a later stage, the government started explaining that okay, the amount which was there in the spinach is not that much, but this is equivalent to 1%. It takes a trip from Tokyo to New York round trip, then it will be this many. What I forgot the unit. This much that particular unit, but now what we are exposed to is this percentage or this many times. So that's a very easy to understand way. But if you just only say this number, but the normal it is very difficult. How we are affected. So those are the possibly 2 issues, and of course there is very complex problem. But those were possibly citizens' perspective. Before I end, I would like to end with this particular theme quote. Yes, Japan will possibly, there were lots of positive sides, there were lots of negative sides. But let me point out how, when we go to the field and how we see this particular lady, she told that she is around 81. So she told that, he says, we have many problems and we don't have enough food. But don't worry. There are many other people in other evacuation centers who need it more than us. Please go to them and please help them. Oh, don't worry. I survived World War II, so I can survive this disaster very easily. So it's a very small word possibly, maybe difficult to generalize, but that felt a very strong sacrifice, feelings of sacrifice, and that was extremely sort of visible in most of the evacuation. Nobody, we talked to so many people, but nobody made any complaint. The second one is this gentleman is 78 years old, and he, during the tsunami, he actually evacuated with his grandson. His grandson is around 6 or 7 years old. So after that, there was no water. They had to go to some high area to get the spring water. And then once they were coming back, and his grandson saw some juice bottles coming out of the damaged convenience store, and his grandson wanted to drink that one. And he told, no, you should not, because this is not yours. Unless you know that whose is this one, and unless you get the permission, you shouldn't drink. That is again extremely means, and what he told, that possibly this is my, and he was telling it very loud with a lot of laugh, that possibly this is my last disaster, last major disaster in my life. I am already 78, but possibly this is not the last for my grandson. He may have many other disasters in future, because you know this is the, I think, a very active area and all these things. And then he told that I want to teach this lesson to my grandson, that the panic situation doesn't mean that we get whatever we just find. We need to have the self-dignity, and we need to have the self-respect. And this is the teaching which I want to give to my grandson. That was a real thing. And the third one is this, he's the leader, village leader of a small village. And he told that, yes, we got affected by the sea, but we have our own sea. Because lots of people were discussing whether it should be relocated, this and that, and all this things. So his comment was, yes, we are affected by the sea, but we have our sea. Very interestingly, day before yesterday when I was attending this Gujarat conference, reconstruction conference, Narendra Modi, Chief Minister, was there, and he told a very similar word. He told that, yes, we had in Gujarat, we had the earthquake, but we had also our natural resource beneath the earth. So, that's again a very sort of global question. So what I was trying to give possibly again, it's a very small glimpse of the whole major problem, some positive sides, some negative sides, but again it's too early to make any conclusion. There will be lots of different issues coming up, lots of facts and figures will come up, lots of stories will come up. That will possibly give us a much better idea.